"You're not coming to our wedding. If you come, it will be the end of our relationship." My oldest son and future daughter-in-law agreed with a nod of their heads. My heart sank as I sensed how much they despised me. What exactly had I done to them? Wasn't I just acting like a normal mother to them? What was the matter with me? What made them despise me so much? They must really hate me, saying not to come to their wedding. But I can't come up with anything I did wrong. My husband too, of course. I'm unable to forgive my son. How could he act in this manner after I took such good care of him over the years? I can't believe he treats his mother this way. I need to make him understand that his demeanors are wrong. He will be punished if he disrespects his mother. Mary, a 55-year-old housewife, is my name. I have 2 sons. Our eldest son, David, now works for a company in Tokyo and is a fairly high-class elite man. Tom, our second son, on the other hand, has always been quiet and prefers tedious work, so he works at a manufacturing company in his hometown. When they were younger, the brothers were close, but as they grew, David began to dislike Tom. He would publicly humiliate Tom and openly harass him at school. Even after I scolded David, his attitude towards Tom did not change. Just recently, David has decided to get married. He will be married to a woman who works for the same company. "She said that she would like to meet you guys, so I decided to plan a dinner." I was relieved to receive such a call because it meant I could finally send him off. David didn't want to be around Tom, and Tom himself said, "That would be better for me, too." And the day we promised to meet came. They had reserved a private room at a rather pricey restaurant. I was distracted by the unfamiliar place, but when I entered the room, David and a strong-looking woman were already seated. "Hey, Mom and Dad, you guys are late." "I'm sorry, we got lost as we have never been here before." "Don't embarrass me so much." My heart ached at his words, but David is always like that, so I decided not to worry. We took our seats and ate our delicious meal while listening to their conversation. "She pays attention to everything I say. She thinks a lot about our future together. She's a wonderful person. If I had someone like her by my side much earlier, I would have succeeded in much more things. She is a perfectionist who excels at everything she does. She is so different from you guys, Mom and Dad." David was happily talking about his fiancée. Cheerfully, she was telling him to stop. David appeared to be obsessed with her, and when he speaks, all he can do is praise her or himself. When I asked him about how they met, he said, "You should know how good she is instead of such a boring story like that." Even though we had only met, I felt like he was trying to make her look good to us as much as possible, which made me very uncomfortable. My husband was also uneasy, and I was relieved that I had not brought Tom with us. "I can say this again and again, but she is different from you guys. Please don't be mean to her after we get married. Give her some respect." "I don't need you to tell me that, because I wouldn't do that." "Ha, let's see. You guys have prioritized Tom over me my whole life. With that in mind, I can't trust that you guys wouldn't do anything to her." David's words stopped me in my tracks. He is saying whatever he wants, and we were worried about Tom because David harassed him so much. Tom has been troubled by David's harassment since he was a child, and it is natural for a person to try to alleviate their child's stress. When I asked David why, he simply stated, "Because I didn't like Tom. So I couldn't ever solve the problem." I didn't know David would take that situation as us loving Tom more than him. However, I did not want to make a scene. so I couldn't object to David's words. The tense dinner concluded without incident, but I knew that all the issues hadn't been resolved. "Aren't you guys getting old? Don't worry, we'll take care of you too." David had made the decision on his own that he would live with us after their marriage. He appeared to have obtained the consent from his fiancée. She was saying, "You have another son who will not be dependent forever, don't you? I must take care of him." I felt really uneasy about that. Tom does live with us, but he does so because he actively cares for us, not because he is spoiled by us. David and his family, on the other hand, moved into our house without our permission, took over our room, and began acting as if they were the owners. "Why don't you go weed the garden, Tom?" "Sorry, but I have to leave for work." "You don't have a job. Go ahead and do it yourself." "What? You're so arrogant." David's persistent nudging of Tom has gotten stronger. I was amused to see Tom approach the situation with more maturity. But things were not that simple. David and his family were attempting to force Tom and us out of the house without telling us. It was late at night after my husband and Tom had both gone to bed. I was thirsty and went to get some water. The living room light was turned on. "Hey, when will this house be ours?" "Just a little more time. We need concrete plans, so there is no interruptions. I want to renovate the house after we get rid of the others. This house looks old." David chuckles at her words. I agree. "I can't believe it. I can't believe they are thinking about doing this. I told my husband and Tom right away. It would be a disaster if we did not act immediately." Tom spoke up while my husband and I were unsure what to do. "Mom, I'll take care of it. I have a strategy." Tom's words were comforting, but the plan he had given me demanded patience more than anything else. However, if Tom's way works, David and his fiancée will be out of here for good. That is why my husband and I agreed to follow Tom's plan. There were many issues, but life went on as usual, and David and his fiancée's wedding date was set. They decided to have their wedding at a very nice nearby wedding hall. We thought having it here in the countryside would not be so great, but the location we saw was quite nice. It's a little pricey, but with the money we're making, it's doable. I was annoyed to see David smile at me, but I kept my mouth shut. David continued to poke at Tom, but thanks to Tom's mature demeanor, it didn't appear to be too painful. The couple waved me over when the wedding date was set. When I went to see them with my husband and Tom, we were told something outrageous. "Please, don't come to our wedding. Our relationship will end if you come." The words astounded me. I eventually regained my composure and asked David, "Are you sure? Why so suddenly?" "I'm terrified of you guys. I don't want these people at my wedding." It was impossible not to feel angry when she fake cried in response to my question. "I'm telling you again, if you come, our relationship is done. Isn't that how you want it anyways? Aren't I your horrible son? Unlike my younger brother who can't do anything wrong." David pointed at Tom. Tom appeared to be at loss for words. I finally lost patience when I heard him saying that. "That's it, David. You've been bullying Tom all this time. Why are you acting this way? You guys are siblings. Stop treating him that way." David and his wife turned their attention to me as I said this. "You can't say anything about me. You were deceived by Tom's fake acts and spoiled him. You have always treated me so differently. That's because you bully your little brother. Isn't that just an excuse? You couldn't help yourself because Tom was so cute." "That is not true." David refused to speak to me, despite my repeated assurances that I did not favor Tom. Why is he not listening to me? First and foremost, it became like this because of his own actions. Why doesn't he try to think about any of it? David is my son, even if he's a jerk. I felt obligated to look after him. However, this is no longer the case. I made the decision to abandon my son at this point. Okay, then I'm not going to the wedding. I stated that I was no longer concerned. Tom and my husband both gave me wide eyes, but David and the others seemed content. But you are certain about this? You will be sorry. No, we will not be sorry. The best weddings are those with no distractions. They were cheering. Our hearts, on the other hand, were sad. We didn't need to go to a wedding when we weren't invited. Finally, our family decided not to attend the wedding. We weren't even given an invitation, so even if we went, we probably couldn't go in anyways. David seemed content the entire time, but they had no idea what this would entail. It was amusing to think about the strategy Tom had come up with. The new married couple got through the wedding without incident, but they still stayed at our house. They recently changed jobs to be closer to the house, so they were busy packing some things and moving to the new office. They returned home from work on the first day after transferring offices. When they came home, they called Tom in a panic. "Tom, what's going on?" They questioned Tom. When I asked them what had happened, they told me briefly. On their first day at work, as they were being shown around the company, they saw Tom, who was not supposed to be there. When the boss, who was showing them around, and spotted Tom, he bowed and said, "Thank you for all your help." He told them that Tom was the president of one of the company's clients. The couple, who had thought Tom was just a factory worker, could not hide their surprise at his words. In fact, Tom had been working diligently at the factory since he started working there. His hard work had been recognized by the president who ran the factory. Tom's unique ideas were indispensable for running the factory, and Tom had been admired by those around him ever since he started working there. Thanks to him, the factory began to improve its performance. Before long, it had become a factory that many companies were relying on. But then the president fell ill. Tom was worried about the president and always went to visit him on his days off. Seeing Tom's dedication to the factory and to others, the president appointed him as the next president. Tom was humbled at the time, saying, "I can't do that." But the president's determination was not easily swayed. With the support and encouragement of those around him, Tom successfully rose to the position of president. The factory's performance grew even more after that. Tom had always been well-liked, was highly trusted by his employees, and it seemed that he had good sense as a president. The factory has now grown into one that is relied upon by companies all over Japan. Tom's face is known even by large companies in Tokyo. Today, Tom was visiting the company to have a discussion with the client. That was all. However, the couple who did not think Tom was in such a good position were not happy that he was treated in such a way. "Of course, you cheated. You've always been like that." David grabbed Tom. "If you had told us, we wouldn't have behaved like that. Why didn't you tell us?" David's wife broke down in tears on the spot. What an ironic situation. "I made it to the top by my abilities, that's all. So why are you so angry?" Tom said this with a nonchalant expression on his face. David's anger seemed to be aroused by this expression, and he began to yell at him. "Don't act like that to me!" But Tom spoke calmly to David. "I want you to listen to something else. I think it's the most important thing for you." Somehow we were able to quiet David and his wife, and got them to sit down. Tom, who had gone to his room to get something, came back and began to tell us the story. First of all, look at this. Tom then laid out several photographs on the table. In them were David's wife and a man dressed in a fancy outfit. To put it bluntly, they were pictures of the scene of David's wife having a love affair. David looked at it and started shouting, "This is fake!" David's wife was trembling as if she did not know what to do. "She's going to be my sister-in-law, so I did some research beforehand. Then I found all this evidence. With this much evidence, there's no way you can get away with it, right?" Hearing Tom's words, David's wife put her head down. "I'm sorry." David, who could not believe the situation, was simply stunned. This is what happens when you don't focus on the inside of a person. No one can be perfect. Tom laughed, and we couldn't help but giggle. David fell to his knees in despair. The only sound in the room was David's wife apologizing to him earnestly. In the end, David and his wife got divorced. David isn't kind enough to forgive cheating. His wife was in panic when she was asked to pay alimony, but she was able to manage it with her parents' money. However, this was not enough to heal David's wounds. David quit his job due to the shock of the divorce. Since then, David has been shutting himself away in his room, and the only time we see him is when he comes out to get his meals. However, when Tom was there, he would screech a little and run away. It seems that since that time, he is scared of Tom. The family had discussed many times what to do with David. In the end, everyone agreed to end relationship with David in the near future. I am sure that would be a terrible thing for us to do to David. However, we were not kind enough to forgive him for the selfishness he has shown us. A few months later, David was kicked out from the house. Toward the end, he cried out to forgive him. But to be honest, I no longer recognized him as family, so I think this was a natural consequence. The three of us, on the other hand, are now living a carefree life with no one in our way. My husband has retired, but we are still able to live without any financial difficulties thanks to Tom's work. At least until the end of my life, I would like to make sure Tom has a good family. Tom is getting married soon. His fiancée is an employee of the same company, and they have been dating for several years. I am looking forward to the wedding of my precious son.
I'm Alvina, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. My family of 4 includes my husband Morris, our 2 daughters who are in elementary school, and we also live together with my in-laws on the same property, making us a household of 6. Before marriage, I worked a job with night shifts, but Morris suggested, "I'd rather you quit if it means we don't cross paths as much," so I chose to leave my job. Since then, I devoted my time to raising our children when they were young and worked part-time when things got a bit more manageable. I wasn't very keen on the idea of living with my in-laws. At the point of contemplating living together, I was still uncertain about what kind of people they were, regardless of how wonderful they might be. I believed that a daughter-in-law living with her in-laws could lead to stress. So I felt relieved when Morris assured me before our marriage that we wouldn't have to live with his parents. However, right after we got married, Morris brought up the subject of living with his parents, saying, "I'm worried about my parents. What about living on the same property? It's not like we will be living in the same house, right?" I was taken aback and protested, but Morris countered, "Do you dislike my parents that much? We will live on the same property but separately. I just want to be near in case something happens. If our situations were reversed, wouldn't you want to live with your parents?" I found myself unable to refute him. My parents were still fit and healthy, living with my brother and his wife, so we were not going to live with them. I think that's why Morris could say things like, "If the roles were reversed, I would live with them." While I was still undecided and had not given my approval, Morris told me after a while, "My parents have already started building a house on our property. We can't refuse now." And so, we were forced into living together. Although I was unhappy, I managed to negotiate one condition. We will not interfere with each other's lives. And so our shared property living arrangement began. My in-laws adhered to our agreement of non-interference. We led separate lives in our respective homes, and I joined them for meals once or twice a week. The house they built on our property was beautiful, and I even began to think that it might be a lucky break for us since we would inherit it eventually. However, that was a big mistake. My mother-in-law slowly started breaking our initial agreement. At first, she would visit our house once or twice a week and ask for help with tasks that I felt were reasonable, such as, "My back hurts a little, can you carry this?" Or, "I'm not feeling well today, can you prepare dinner?" However, over time, she started making demands like, "Isn't breakfast ready yet?" And, "Why hasn't our part of the house been cleaned?" As if it was a given that I would be doing all the housework. As a result, I ended up cooking all 3 meals and cleaning both houses. Morris didn't say anything about this. Only my father-in-law would say, "Sorry for always asking you to do this." Sometimes he would kindly offer me some snacks and say, "I know it's not much, but please have this." Not only did my mother-in-law make me do the housework, but she also started interfering with how we educated our children. She started saying things like, "They should take these lessons," or, "It's strange that your 2 girls don't help with housework. What did you give birth to 2 girls for?" Yet every time mother-in-law lashed out at me, father-in-law would come to my defense. "You remember we had agreed to manage our respective homes, right?" Father-in-law would chide mother-in-law, who would say, "Oh right, I forgot. I guess I'm feeling weak and unwell, so I might have leaned on you a bit too much. I'm sorry." And she would apologize, at least on the surface. But a few hours later, when father-in-law wasn't looking, the harassment would start again. Even when I tried to tell Morris that this wasn't what we had agreed on, he would just say, "Even if you made an agreement at first, we're family, aren't we? We should be flexible when times get tough. It's your fault for not handling it well." I spent my days filled with frustration, and then suddenly, mother-in-law collapsed at home. We quickly called an ambulance, but mother-in-law passed away from a sudden seizure. I couldn't tell father-in-law or Morris, but part of me was relieved that the harassment would finally end. Despite our agreement to not interfere in each other's lives, father-in-law had always been kind to me, and I felt differently towards him. I did my best to take care of him and his needs. Father-in-law often thanked me, saying, "I'm sorry for breaking our agreement not to interfere. I just can't handle housework on my own. Thank you so much." Our daughters were very fond of their gentle grandfather, and we spent many peaceful days together. But sadly, this peace didn't last long. Just a few months after mother-in-law passed away, father-in-law suddenly collapsed too. Father-in-law survived, but he was bedridden and needed constant care. During a discussion about father-in-law's care, he mentioned wanting to go to a nursing home to avoid being a burden, but Morris stepped in. "Don't say things like that, Dad. Family should care for each other. Nursing homes are for when family absolutely can't. Alvina said she's okay with taking care of you," he said, completely taking me by surprise. I did love father-in-law. I wanted to do whatever I could to help him. Even if he went to a nursing home, I was planning to visit him frequently, but caring for him full-time at home was a different matter entirely. It was clear that Morris wouldn't help. As a stay-at-home mom with young kids to look after, taking care of father-in-law would be a significant challenge. But I couldn't express my reluctance in front of father-in-law, who was different from mother-in-law. I had no choice but to agree to his care. As expected, the caregiving was quite difficult. I needed to assist him with meals, bathroom visits, and bathing. Father-in-law was a robust, elderly man, and as a member of the opposite sex, we both felt uncomfortable at times. Every day, I'd assist with the kids' school preparations and breakfast, do housework during the day, care for the kids when they got home, and prepare dinner, all on top of caring for father-in-law. Every night before going to sleep, I'd think, I somehow made it through the day. Then I would just collapse into bed. Morris, instead of helping with father-in-law's care, started spending even less time at home, citing work as an excuse. He claimed to have overnight work and only came home about 2 to 3 times a week. Furthermore, because I never knew when he'd come back home, I often struggled to prepare dinner in time. On days when my body ached from the sheer exhaustion, I prepared something simple. But even then, Morris would rage, "I'm working my tail off there, and this is the thanks I get?" When I asked him for a little help around the house or with caring for his father, he retorted, "You're a full-time homemaker, aren't you? Caring for my father is your job." I felt miserable every day. This distressing situation dragged on for 3 years. My 2 daughters grew older and began to help with housework and caring for their grandfather, which helped lighten the burden. Chantel pitched in every day, helping with cooking and cleaning. Janie tenderly wiped her grandfather's back each day, asking, "Does that feel good, Grandpa?" I was truly grateful to have such kind daughters. One day, Morris left his mobile phone at home when he went to work. Despite knowing better, I couldn't resist the temptation to take a look inside his phone. The password was his birthday, so I could unlock it instantly. What I found inside was a succession of shocking revelations. Unbelievably, Morris had been having an affair since around the time I started caring for his father, and they even had a child together. From their text messages, it was clear that Morris was also supporting his mistress financially. Although he'd given me money for living expenses and said, "I'll save the rest for our children's future," he hadn't saved a dime. The messages got worse. My kid's already in elementary school, so he's not cute anymore. And caring for the old man is a pain, but thank God for my idle wife. It's a waste of money to put him in a care facility, but having my wife do it is free. Gotta make use of free labor, right? LOL. He was ridiculing me and our children. Under normal circumstances, I should have kept my cool and stayed silent until I had definitive evidence, but I was so furious, I couldn't remain calm. As soon as Morris got out of the bath, I shoved his mobile phone in his face and demanded, "What is this about?" At first, Morris seemed a little taken aback, but he quickly regained his composure. "You've lost your femininity since you had our kids," he said, scorn filling his words. "You've stopped wearing makeup, and your outfits are all about comfort. Since you started breastfeeding our second child and falling asleep with your mouth open, I felt completely turned off. And when you began caring for my dad, you lost even more of your femininity. You're not even a middle-aged woman anymore, more like a middle-aged man." His cruel words tore at my heart. But he didn't stop there. "You know, my girlfriend always wears makeup and takes care of her appearance, even after having a child," he continued, coldly asserting. "I have no plans to divorce you for appearance's sake, but my love is for her and our child. I'm not sure who'll go first, but once my dad is gone and our kids are adults, I plan to kick you out and live in the house with her." And so he continued to spew words indicating he considered me nothing more than trash, even though he appeared to have some concern for the children. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I too want to dress up and put on proper makeup, but you didn't help with childcare or housework at all. Juggling unfamiliar childcare and trying to do housework perfectly, I had to do it frantically, even if it meant messing up my hair. If you wanted me to look beautiful, why didn't you help with housework, childcare, or even the elder care? And even without a payback, shouldn't a husband and a father naturally help out? I pleaded through my tears, but my words didn't resonate with Morris. "That's not true. Look at other women. They stay beautiful while raising their kids. As I've told you many times, it's just that you're not efficient. You, a stay-at-home mom, have no right to argue with me, the one who's putting food on the table," he coldly retorted. "If you have a complaint, you're free to divorce, you know? For a woman in her mid-30s like you, employment opportunities are limited, right? You think you can raise our 2 kids just because you'll get a bit of alimony and compensation from me?" he sneered. I felt struck in the worst possible way, and I couldn't say anything in return. Thinking about the children, I felt I couldn't divorce. Seeing this, Morris said, "You can't, can you? If you care about the kids, you'll take care of my father until the end. After that, you'll work as my housekeeper. But don't worry, when the kids grow up, they'll help you out. So you better treat them well." Ha ha ha. He then went into his room with a satisfied smirk. For a while, I was dumbfounded and remained in place. Somehow I managed to regain my sanity and went to attend to my father-in-law. I intended to act as usual, but it must have been clear something was wrong. My father-in-law asked, "Is something wrong?" I tried to brush it off, saying, "Nothing at all." I couldn't hold back my tears, and I ended up telling him everything. After hearing me out, he said, "Alvina, I have something to give you. Can you come back in a few hours?" I did as he asked, and when I went to him after a few hours, he handed me a piece of paper with someone's contact details and said, "Contact this person." He then added, "They know everything. I should be the one taking action, but with this body of mine." He smiled brightly. A few days later, Morris told me, "As I told you before, I will be on a business trip for a week from now. Well, I guess it's better for you too if we call it a business trip, right? I will enjoy the sightseeing, so I decided to take this opportunity to take action." And a week later, "Hey, what the hell is going on? I come home and everything is gone?" Morris was raging and half panicking when he called me. I replied, "Oh, my, how was your week-long affair trip? Did you enjoy it?" Morris shouted, "Hey, stop messing around. I'm asking what the hell is going on." I decided to explain to Morris. The contact that my father-in-law gave me was for a Mr. Quarry, an old friend of his and a well-known, large-scale landowner in the region. Apparently, Mr. Quarry had always coveted the land where my in-laws' house stood and had been trying to negotiate for it. However, my father-in-law would always refuse, saying, "I plan to leave it to my son." But after observing the behavior of his son Morris and hearing my story, he seemed to have decided that his son was a lost cause. We had known in advance that Morris was planning to take a week-long affair trip because he was openly defiant and didn't try to hide it at all. Before that week, I had a talk with Mr. Quarry and we arranged to sell the house and land. It was a piece of land that Mr. Quarry had wanted for quite some time, so he was willing to buy it at a price considerably higher than the market rate. And during that week, the house was demolished. My father-in-law had requested Mr. Quarry, "This might be a bit selfish, but given the circumstances, could you do the demolition during this period if you're planning to anyway?" So when Morris came back, all he found was an empty lot. And we're going to have a new house built with my money my father-in-law got from selling the old house and land. Upon hearing this, Morris tried to persuade me to return to him, saying, "But you're jobless, aren't you? Even if Dad builds a house, you can't expect to be supported for the rest of your life. What are you going to do without my income? It's going to be tough, right?" I replied, "Well, don't worry about that. I did have some concerns about that part, but my father-in-law and Mr. Quarry have done quite a bit. I got a job offer from a company run by an acquaintance who happens to be looking for employees." And then I asked him, "Morris, shouldn't you be worrying about yourself instead?" When Morris suspiciously asked, "What do you mean?" I told him, "The company where you are working now, you got it because the president is a friend of your father's. But now that he's deciding to cut ties with you, he's spoken to the president. Feel free to fire him if this work is poor and he's committing adultery." The president responded, "It was hard to say, but he's been acting like he can't be fired and causing trouble. Let's see what happens from tomorrow." All I heard from the other end of the line was a surprised, "What?" Then silence. He tried to excuse himself, saying, "Well, I mean, I might have said some things out of anger before, like I was going to leave you in the future, but come on, that can't be true. Don't take it seriously. We're family. We should stick together, right? Can't you mediate between me and Dad?" So I told him, my family now is my daughters and my father-in-law. Goodbye, and hung up the phone. There were numerous calls from Morris after that, but I ignored them all. Later on, my divorce from Morris was finalized. I claimed compensation from Morris and his mistress. As Morris hadn't tried to hide his affair at all, I had gathered plenty of evidence. All of this information I heard from various people, such as the president of Morris's company, who was a friend of my father-in-law. Although it seems like extramarital affair wouldn't have led to this firing, astonishingly, Morris was embezzling company funds to support his double life. Morris was not only fired from his job, but he's also being sued for damages. He lost his home and job and tried to move in with his mistress, only to be dumped when she realized he had no money. On top of all of this, he was ordered to pay child support. Now Morris is spending his days job hunting while working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and child support. As for me, I plan to live with my daughters and my father-in-law in a fully leased house until I move into the house that my father-in-law is building for us. When father-in-law offered to build the house, he said, "I'm moving into a care facility. I want you and your daughters to live happily here, Alvina." I countered, "What are you talking about, Dad? We're family. Besides, it would make the girls sad. Let's live together." Hearing this, my daughters also took father-in-law's hand and said, "We want to live with Grandpa." With tears in his eyes, father-in-law thanked us. While the girls do help out, caring for him while working is indeed tough, so we are currently enjoying our life together as a family of 4 with the help of home assistance and day services. We can't wait to move into our new home as a family of 4.